Pledge allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Pursuant to the provisions of Section 2.68.030 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws, notice is hereby given that if you're not satisfied with the decision made by the Metropolitan Transportation Licensing Commission, you may appeal the decision by petitioning for a writ of certiorari with the Davidson County Chancery or Circuit Court. Your appeal must be filed within 60 days of the date of the entry of the Metropolitan Transportation Licensing Commission's decision. We advise that you seek your own independent legal advice to ensure your appeal is filed in a timely manner and that all procedural requirements have been met. Mr. Fields circulated the draft minutes from our previous meeting. Is there a motion regarding approval?
I so move.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. We've been asked to take an item out of order by Mr. Fields. First item we're going to take up is consideration of proposed limited alternative operational routes for entertainment transportation, pedal carriages, and pedicabs to apply during the period while the Broadway Viaduct is closed for construction.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you'll remember at your meeting in May, a preliminary or a proposal was presented that involved how would we deal with entertainment, transportation, and pedal vehicles during the time which the Broadway Viaduct was closed for the construction as you just described. At that time, we also talked about public engagement, and Director Alicorn asked that we held a public meeting. We did have a meeting. It was well attended. So in addition to that meeting, you asked that public comment be made by June the 12th. Then we had the meeting on the 20th of June, so we gathered information. That information was bundled, and it was shared with you, of course, but it was also went back up to engineering, and they were able to look it over and have some suggestions, and that would be a little different than what we proposed at the initial meeting, based on what we learned from both the industry as well as the industry themselves, the public, and others that provide information. So I'll kick it over there.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Commissioners. My name is Brad Freeze with the Nashville Department of Transportation. I work there as Deputy Director. So after the feedback period that Billy mentions, we took another look at it, looked at the routes. We have decided to recommend another approach where we're flipping it. Instead of setting routes, setting exclusion zones instead around where the detour locations are, because that's really our true purpose, is to try to limit congestion in those key detour places. So if you see up here, TD has already put the map up here. We put this together based on that input, but also based on our discussions and looking at, in blue you can see that is the TDOT detour around Broadway. So we've taken that and we've considered that in those intersections where the most congestion is going to be in the diversions. And there, in what you see in red, is the exclusion zones we'd like to set that are within the detour area, and there to try to limit construction. I'll say this, anytime you take 18 to 20,000 vehicles per day off of a roadway, a bridge crossing, you're going to have to deal with that traffic. But we feel like this is the best approach to try to limit that congestion. We are still working every day. We actually were out in the field every day this week because, as you know, Broadway is currently shut down when they're doing some tooling up for the complete shutdown for 9 weeks. So we actually are looking to schedule a meeting with TDOT next week to discuss that. We have some observations based on that. They've actually provided us support in providing us video cameras in sensor systems out there along the route, so we can actually be more proactive in how we manage that. But we're going to have a debrief with them here hopefully next week and talk about it. But I'm going long, Billy. Sorry, but this is what we came up with, and we think it's a better approach.
Brad, can you zoom in the
Yeah.
map for us?
Describe
And we're gonna-
Yes.
With your permission, we'll turn it just a little bit, give you a better view. Just let the commission look at it, and then we're gonna share it. This isn't a secret.
Would you be willing to also tell us what streets
Yes.
the red is involving?
Absolutely. So you can see 8th Avenue between Church and Memoriam there. That is along the main detour path. We're restricting movement of ATVs along that pathway. Also from 7th Avenue to that intersection with Broadway and 8th, restricting movement there. That's leading up to the main detour point. Restricting movement over the Church Street Bridge. That's where the heaviest movement that we've noticed so far of people diverting in over the Church Street Bridge. And then on the Bunbury Street Bridge, just restricting movement from 10th Avenue to 8th Avenue right there in that section. So that it does give a pathway across the railroad bridge as well, but it limits congestion within that intersection.
So the long red, is that Church Street?
That is Church Street,
All right.
correct.
And then on the opposite side, is that Broadway from 8th and 7th down to
Correct.
what?
It's from 7th Avenue up to the 8th Avenue, right?
8th
there.
Avenue.
Yeah, that short section right there.
And then the
Not
red
leading
that
up.
connects Church and Broadway, what street is that?
That's 8th Avenue.
That is 8th, okay.
8th Avenue all the way over to 14th Avenue over there on the
Okay.
other side of it.
Thank you.
Email that, so
Ab-
I can't see it. I can't either.
Absolutely. Can you email that to me? Let me see.
Or if you can, could you stand up there and kind of?
Absolutely. Vanna White?
Please.
So this is Church Street here across, and this is 8th Avenue. So in blue, what you see is the main detour route for TDOT. So you can see it cuts over here at 8th and then going this direction, cuts over here at 8th and then goes over Church. And then in this direction, it cuts over here. It comes back over to Broadway at 8th Avenue as well. So this section is 8th from Church to Church to Memoriam, excuse me, right here. Those are those points right there. And then this is 7th Avenue right here. Here's where Hume Fog is. You can see that in that map. So this is 7th Avenue all the way to 8th Avenue right here, leading up to that intersection right here. So this is a really, we're looking at it as the biggest congestion points in their diversion plan and how we limit larger vehicles, going through those areas. So that's how we're approaching it.
Is that Commerce, that very small red right there?
No.
Where you pointed at Hume Fog, what is that?
That's Broadway.
That's
Broadway right
that's
here.
Broadway, okay. All right, and then,
Right.
yeah.
And small section of red on the south end,
It's the Memoriam.
that's the number.
This is the Memoriam. Yeah, so this is from 10th to 8th Avenue right here.
What is the bubble say?
It says any ETV or pedal carriage traffic on Memoriam Street will divert on 10th Avenue South. So we're just, a pathway, around and then back over to 8th Avenue, to stay off of this section.
And there, we're going to ask everyone to, because of the nature of it, they typically are not getting entertainment transportation. We're going to ask that that the sound, didn't mean to say noise entertainment, folks. The sound that they're producing, ask them to go silent for those 3 or 4 blocks till they get back over to the generally accepted operation area.
Does that include not banging on the side of the vehicle or encouraging guests to scream?
That's the conversation I'm going to be, that I guess I'm having now with all of them, but yes.
We would also like to request some flexibility from the commission in the interim. I know you don't meet until July, so as we go along, we assume, things may come up that we may have to tweak in shape this based on what's happening. We have the Grand Prix coming up, in the window of this closure too. So we would like to be granted the authority to do some tweaking of this as we go along and adjust based on what's occurring with closures. That's all I got.
With the recommended exclusion zone up there of Church Street,
Spurs for Broadway and Demonbreun, where do you anticipate the ETVs traversing over to downtown from Midtown?
So they could come back around Commerce and back around to Midtown if they're going that direction. Out.
No, my question is,
Or, I mean, not
What-
Commerce, excuse me, I mean Demonbreun. I said Commerce, apologize.
so they would still be using Demonbreun?
Yeah, they can get across on Demonbreun after they pass.
Are there other ways to cross for ETVs presently besides Demonbreun?
No, not on this map.
There are other bridges, though. I mean, they can.
Yeah, there are.
They
I
can go
mean,
on
they
the Division
could,
Street Bridge.
it's a longer way around, yes, that's correct.
So
But not
longer,
in
longer tour,
Correct.
tour route.
We feel like, I mean, the ETV operators know their routes and then know the streets of Nashville fairly well in there. So we're proposing these exclusions because we feel like it's a better option other than designating them a route. They know their way around town, and we set the exclusion. We don't want to define how they have to get around specifically in there, other than just staying out of these exclusion zones during.
Are there other exclusion zones currently in place?
Well, by regulation, there's exclusions, I believe.
Well, there are exclusions based on being in front of a school or a healthcare facilities.
No, I meant crossing from Midtown to downtown.
Not at the present time.
No.
Okay.
This is mainly just focused because of the massive amount of traffic in response to, again, a wide variety of opinions. I think that's where engineering came back and said, let's look at this and see if it makes sense and see if it works. And with your permission, to be able to move a little bit to accommodate whatever problems might come up.
I might also add, Billy, excuse me, Diana Alarcon. I might also add that this is also what we heard,
Sorry.
we've heard from the community as well. So not just from the industry, but also
Absolutely.
from the community itself. So a lot of the hotels were there. We had different. So this was really kind of one of the directions that we were asked to look at versus what we had originally proposed. So this is also based on a lot of community feedback. I just want to share that.
I apologize. I probably overstated that, but Mr. Powell was present at the hearing, as was Commissioner Westlake, and it was a broad view of downtown, ranging from neighbors to business owners to industry operators to representative groups, neighborhood groups. So it was a really good meeting, and that plus all the other information that came in prior to that meeting, again, which was shared.
Well, I will just say this makes more sense to me because, I mean, I left the meeting the other day thinking, well, where's most of the traffic going to be that's being diverted off Broadway, and how do we just avoid that, right? I mean, and this appears to do that. So that makes a lot more sense than the previous plan.
Relative to the traffic monitoring, I'm curious the tools in place and what you've seen to date. I'd just say, as a business owner in the Gulch on 12th Avenue and business owner on 2nd and 3rd, I've spent time, at least the last couple of mornings, walking around to try to monitor traffic, at least for ingress and egress for our customers and tenants and delivery vehicles in particular. And I've seen a pretty big crush on 12th that was bad on Tuesday until probably 10:30 in the morning, when usually it stops by 8:30 or 9. Looking at my webcam right now, I've got a webcam on 12th. 12th is busy it's busy at Demonbreun. I haven't panned around to Demonbreun. It's busy, I guess it's busy at, it's busy at McGavick Street. I haven't panned yet around to Demonbreun to see if it's still busy. And then I noticed interstate flows were quite a bit more congested coming into the core, with people kind of diverting around, not necessarily to Mumbrian or Church, but diverting to Second. And I'm just curious what your monitoring has shown, if anything.
So I was driving around yesterday, in there as well, monitoring. But we've had staff in the field all week doing, so we're recording information now, and that's what we want to discuss with TDOT when we get back. So as far as monitoring, we have, TDOT is actually providing us cameras and what's called Blue Toad. They're actually Bluetooth sensors that actually record travel times and transverse that we can get in real time and actually see how we can proactively adjust our signals. But I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Anytime you're taking, a bridge that's carrying 18 to 20,000 people a day over it, it's going to be tough with the capacity that we have downtown. But we're trying to work as proactively, and TDOT has been a great partner in doing so. So they've provided that. We also have additional services, engineering services that we're utilizing as well to help look at this and look at retiming plans and be proactive. But yeah, we've seen much what you've explained as far as the changes in travel behavior. It's always a guess, before you do something like this, and you have to adjust as you go along. We saw the same thing when we had the work on 440. And when we had the work on the Fast Fix 8, you remember the Fast Fix 8 job, and TDOT did a tremendous job with that in actually providing us some resources too, similar to what they're doing here today with this project. So we not going to sugarcoat it. Like I said, I mean, it's going to be a challenge. There's going to be a lot of congestion in the area, but we're working as proactively as possible to try to mitigate that.
And that's also one of the reasons why we're asking
Sorry.
for some flexibility in the motion that is made, so that as we are collecting this information that TDOT's providing us, if we need to tweak what we have outlined today, we would have that ability to do that, because we're going to have some items that are going to be a little bit more real time that's going to provide us. But until we actually have the bridge closed and we're aware of what's and how people are moving, it's a little bit hard. Right now, they do have you diverting at 12th, but when they actually shut it down for good, the diversion's going to happen further back, as you can see from the map. Right now, if you cross over, you're actually crossing over the interstate, and you can make a choice to go either right or left at 12, which is creating more traffic. But that changes when we actually move to this new plan, because you can see TDOT's going to be diverting on the other side of the interstate. So they're moving the traffic, the diversion in a different place as to what they're doing today, given that the bridge was closed today for a certain amount of time. So even they're recognizing, so that's why we want a little bit of flexibility so that we can, as we're collecting the real-time data, we'll have the ability to also make adjustments. Thank you.
So would this be a good time to turn around for the public to see the screen?
Yes.
So while you're doing that, I had a comment. I did attend the Tuesday public hearing and heard a lot of good commentary from the operators as well as the residents and business people downtown. This is definitely a better solution than what we had initially proposed. One of the questions I heard and I want to address to engineering is, as you were making these adjustments on the fly, one of the things I heard from the operator group was, how are we going to communicate those adjustments to them in real time?
That's a great question. So we would hope that we wouldn't be making major adjustments in real time like that. After looking at the data, we will clearly communicate what exclusion zones going, but I wouldn't say it would be a day-to-day adjustment like that. We really have to have more than one daily data point to start to make some changes. But as far as that's what I'm talking, when I'm talking about that, I'm talking about the exclusion zone specifically in there. We will make tweaks to signal timing and daily and make some adjustments, obviously. But as far as the exclusion zones, it'll be clearly communicated to the ETV operators.
So Billy has most of the ETV's operators' email address, so they'll be getting notice, as well as we also put it out on all social media and through our PIO office. So if we do make an adjustment to the change, we'll actually put that out. We also partner with many of the different news stations as well as radio stations to help put it out. So we'll work through our PIO office as well as through the mayor's PIO office. And then Billy will also be shooting out an email. So we'll set something up that we have to make people as well as informed as possible.
So I just want to commend NDOT on incorporating a lot of the feedback into this proposal. I agree with the other commissioners that I think this does address a majority of the concerns that we heard. So I thank you for your work on this. A couple questions for Mr. Fields. Obviously we'll be looking for partnership from our operators in complying with, this emergency routing situation. What kinds of tools are we going to employ in order to ensure compliance? And additionally, with reference to Ms. Alarcon's, request for flexibility, what would you recommend in terms of advance notice so that our operators can receive, process, and make adjustments to their routes?
Yeah, as soon as it's apparent that there's going to be changes, what we'll do is be prepared to start sending emails quickly. We also have 24-hour contact by telephone, and so, we don't have, it's in a few minutes we can actually dial everyone and speak to them on the phone as well. So there's multiple ways we're going to be able to talk with them very quickly. If we anticipate an issue and we know ahead of time there's fixing to be a change, we might even tell them, hey, we got a change coming, be prepared for a notice coming out. So I guess it'd be like a storm warning. You got to watch and you've got a warning. So if there's a situation that we know could be coming, but if it's on the fly, we're certainly going to communicate as quick as we can. And with respect to enforcement, we're going to continue to do what we're doing. We'll be on the streets. We have staff. We have more staff that are coming on shortly. They're finishing training. We're trying to get them ready. Good or bad, I've been known to go to the street as I have the last couple of days. So we'll all do whatever we have to do to make sure we have compliance. And it'll be there will be some companies that are unlicensed and they'll be getting citations and that sort of thing. And obviously we don't have control of what they're doing, but they'll certainly be cited if they're in areas we're going to cite them where they're not supposed to be.
Thank you.
Chair. In the original proposal, sightseeing vehicles, pedicabs, and horse-drawn carriages were excluded from the, is that still true?
It still is. We will, we very likely will, under departmental authority, what we'll probably do is advise them of that. We'll send this all the information to them, and we'll request they avoid this area as well. But a horse-drawn carriage, for instance, they're not in that area. They would not be in that area. The pedicabs are not going to go that way because they can't get across, so they'll recognize that. But we will share this with all of our, including the taxi cabs and everybody else, advising them of all this information to make sure they're aware of it.
Okay, just want to be clear that if we're trying to reduce congestion as much as possible, that needs to be everybody. Thank you.
We'll do our very best.
Fields, I have just a procedural question then. Since I was not at last month's meeting, but I understand this is essentially a revision of the proposed, instead of having a proposed route, it's just an exclusion to stay off of these particular blocks. Procedurally, are we now at the point where we can consider a motion on adopting these exclusions?
As well as a part of the motion, giving NDOT authority to make appropriate changes and that may need to be made along the way.
And also, this is only meant to be for the duration of which the bridge itself is closed.
Yeah, and that would be till October.
I am curious, do you see that we even are required to make a motion? I mean, 070B gives the authority for the MTLC or staff to establish zones, and so your zone, we don't necessarily have to vote on anything. You already have the authority. 070B of the rules. ETV may operate in zones established by the MTLC or its staff.
Yeah, I was looking at the code provision, which to the extent there's any conflict, to the extent there's any conflict, the code would prevail, but the code provision provides that, oops, sorry, hang on. Be there in a second. Is 677-320, operating area. Entertainment transportation vehicles shall operate upon the streets within the metropolitan area on routes or zones and within the hours of operation established by the MTLC or its staff. And I think that is what this is effectively doing. It's kind of more of a carve out than a carve in, but it is still, designating a zone and explaining that operation will not occur within that zone. And so I do think that staff does have some authority to excuse deviations from approved zones and routes as well, even without it coming before the full MTLC. So, there is a little more flexibility already built in there. But it probably doesn't hurt to acknowledge that in your motion regardless, just to make it clear that the TLC is trusting staff to make those judgment calls in the field.
Is the request for the TLC staff to be able to have the flexibility to make adjustments, or for your group to be able to make the adjustments?
We are a part of the, we are NDOT, and NDOT are us, I guess. But again, it may designate us, but when it comes to something like that, we depend heavily on our engineering division to advise us and give us information and help us figure things out. So whatever would happen, we would be looking to them and for their advice and their wisdom of what would make sense. So, but I think what Mr. Hayes was asking, so they really don't have to take action. If at this point, as an advisement, we've advised you, this is what staff would like to do, I guess I could.
Oh, I see. I'm sorry.
That was my question.
Is it necessary for you to take any action
Given the
whatsoever?
extent the rules that allow staff.
Yeah, so generally where rules allow staff to make a judgment call, there's either an implicit or explicit opportunity for people who disagree with the judgment call made by staff to bring it before the commission. It kind of gives it more finality if you all make the decision as opposed to staff making it unilaterally.
I would think it would be a good idea for us to decide as a commission whether to have these exclusion zones. Just as Ms. Castona said, there's more finality, it's clearer, and if somebody wants to appeal, they have something actually to appeal a ruling from the TLC.
All right, I'll go ahead and make a motion that we are going to accept the recommendation for the exclusion zones for the entertainment, transportation, and pedal carriages and pedicabs during the periods while the Broadway viaduct is closed, which we believe to be until October. And we will additionally, support NDOT in making any type of pivot or change needed, provided that notice is given to our operators according to standard procedures.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? So if we could take pedicabs out of that motion, that would be a good thing. Pedicarriages.
I will amend the motion to remove pedicabs.
And I'll second the amended motion.
Any discussion?
Just make a comment that in addition to notifying operators, I think it'd be good for this group to hear if you're going to make changes. Yeah, I know you would, but I just, just a comment.
I'm certainly okay with the text message or a phone call if we're
Yes.
making
Yes.
but it is nice to be able to hear, to be able, and.
We'll do
and
that.
Social media channels, one, and then I pray, request that you please pay a lot of attention to Demonbreun. Just, it's 2 lanes. It gets jammed really, really quickly. And 3rd Avenue as well, just has been super constrained. So, thank you.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? Motion passes. Next item on our agenda to be considered is, it's under our consent agenda. We have several other passenger vehicle for hire, new company applications. Mr. Fields?
Under other passenger vehicles for hire and new company applications, you have applications for AGO Transportation, Giraffe Transport, Hugo's Luxury Car Service, Nuri Transportation, Pixel Peak LLC, Xian Long Tup LLC, Soho Limo Service, TAD Limo Service, Vortex Enterprise LLC, and Yaz Transportation Corporation. They've been reviewed and are in order.
Is there a motion regarding approval?
Make a motion to approve the other passenger vehicle for hire applications, the 10 that were just named by Mr. Fields.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Also, under our consent agenda is, we've got a few other passenger vehicle for hire certificate changes. Mr. Field?
The changes requested are Def Transportation Services to add Michael Gomez as a partner, Next Level Black Car Transportation LLC to add Sherry Ross as a partner, Luxury Ride Nash Incorporated to change address to 2451 Atrium Way, Nashville 37214. In order to make those changes, the commission needs to be advised, and they're certainly within their rights, and they're in order.
Make a motion to approve the OPVH certificate changes for the 3 named entities that Mr. Fields just mentioned.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. We also have a taxi cab certificate change for American Music City Checker Cab. They have a new address of 316 Donaldson Pike, 37214.
They would like to move their operations. As you know from those that have been on the commission, this was a conglomeration of 3 different companies that came together as American Music City Checker Cab. They are now combining all of their addresses into a single area at 316 Donaldson Pike, and it's zoned properly. Most of you would know exactly the area, so we recommend approval.
I would make a motion to approve American Music City Checker Cab's new address change.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. We also have a new record company application for EJ Towing LLC.
EJ Towing is a new record company. They made application, and their application's in order.
I'll make a motion that we approve the application of EJ Towing LLC.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Next item on our agenda is a public hearing. Each year we have our emergency record zone assignment hearing. We've not received any new application or zone alteration requests. We do have several current emergency record zone assignments. We've got A.B. Collier Wrecker, Bailey's Wrecker, Chapman's Wrecker, Cotton's Roadmaster, Dad's Towing, Donaldson Wrecker, Martin's Wrecker, Mike's Custom Towing, Smith's Wrecker Service, Tommy's Wrecker Service, Tow Pro, and West Nashville Wrecker. Mr. Fields, do we have any requests to speak?
We've invited, as we do every year, the emergency operators. Many of them are here. I'm not sure all of them were able to be here today because of just business on the streets, but many of them are here and will be happy to speak. There are no changes for you to consider. In order for there to be any changes, we would have to have noticed it. So there are no requests for changes or staff recommendations. You know, in advance, I can tell you in the next year, during the next year, there's some potential changes coming, not in the zones themselves, but in dispatching and that sort of thing, where it doesn't directly involve any approval from the commission, but we would want to make presentations, show you to speed processes and that sort of thing. But again, this would be a public hearing, and you can hear from the companies and then have a public hearing, or just have the public hearing. And if they want to speak, they certainly could come up. I provided you with, or actually Ms. Stillman has provided you with a list as well as the name of the operators.
All right, well, with this being a public hearing, I don't want to discourage anyone. If anyone would like to address the issue of emergency record zone assignments, we do have a number of record companies today. I also don't want to discourage you if you'd like to address the commission. Is there anyone who would like to speak?
Any of the merchant companies, if you'd like to speak and say anything about your zone or whatever you'd like to speak about, you're certainly welcome to.
I'm Jim Mitchell with Dad's Towing and West Nashville Record. Just a comment on the zone companies that are working together have never worked together any better than they are at this time. Smooth operations. I cannot even remember having a discussion or a problem. It's been months since we've even had any kind of discussions on any aerial problems or anything at all. It's just been smooth operations. They work together very well, and it's been very pleasant to work with. A big change from it was many years ago. There are some concerns that we do have about some of the calls that we're receiving that are being interfered with outside companies. And there's several of the zone company operators that would like to have a word if the commission will allow it.
Well, this is a hearing for record zone assignments. Certainly, we would like to hear your concerns. I would recommend you raising them with Mr. Fields first, and then he can make a decision on whether it's something he can handle with his staff or if we need to be involved.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
All right.
That's encouraging, though, to hear that everybody's cooperating now.
Hello, my name is Michael Martin. My brother John Martin back here. We're owner-operators of Bailey's Record Service, Mike's Custom Towing, and Martin's Record Service. Third generation, loving the opportunity to provide a service to the public for the city. Want to continue as far as we can. Love the staff here, love the commission. Everything's going great. Appreciate it. Just want to say thanks.
Thank you.
Mike Mark, he's been on with trying to several years now. He's a long time supporter. Some of you remember. We still miss Mike on a daily basis. The leadership he provided in the industry.
David Williams, TowPro, AB Collier, and Cotton's Towing. I'd like to second what Mike had to say just a minute ago. Thank you for the opportunity to serve you and the public of Nashville. Billy, thank you for everything you've done with us. Lisa, same thing. The staff over there has been fantastic. And I look forward to another year of working for Nashville. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I have a question. You represent 3 companies?
Yes, TowPro, Cotton's Towing, and AB Collier.
Do you have 3 different zones, or are you all the same zone?
Yep, we're here. We're here. And we're right here.
As a representative of all 3 companies, you guys get along all right?
We get along great. I love myself.
His father, Doug Williams, retired to Florida. He gets along very well.
I do well.
Be sure to tell him I said that.
I will. Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right, at this time, we'll close the public hearing.
You would need to confirm their zones for another year.
So we need a motion to confirm their zone?
Yeah, to confirm the assignment, the current assignments.
I make a motion to confirm the current assignments for the emergency record zone as they currently stand.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Next item on our agenda is a other passenger vehicle for hire driver application review for Chad Bishop.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Bishop. If you'll give us a moment.
Okay.
I'm ready whenever you are.
Yes. Do you have any introduction for Mr. Bishop?
In the application, you failed to disclose a 2007, a charge in 2007 of assault, which was retired in 2008, as well as a 2001 casual possession of controlled substance charge that he did plead guilty in under 4035-313, and I'll defer back to Mr. McNally when it comes to that particular one, but that is basically, they would have pled, but it would have been after a year, it would be non-existent after that 1 year. Is that the way that works, Mr. McNally?
Judicial diversion, which is the 4035-313, places a person on a period of interesting probation. And if they complete it successfully, then the case can be dismissed and they can petition to have it expunged. It's not automatically expunged. That's why it's showing up on his TBI record.
Correct. So, I guess I misstated that. Thank you, sir. So that guilty plea would end up being dismissed. Could still be on his record, but it would have been dismissed.
Yes, and the other interesting aspect about 4035-313 is it's a conditional guilty plea, but there is no conviction unless they violate that period of that probation, then it will go into effect. So technically the person who's on judicial diversion is not convicted. They can vote, they can arguably possess a firearm and all other rights that a convicted person cannot exercise. However, it's awful. As I remember, our application says you're to include diversion, expungements, every single aspect, so we have full knowledge of what a person's background looks like before we approve their permit.
Yes, sir.
Hope that helps.
And that's the reason the applicant's present in front of the commission.
Well, Mr. Bishop, I'm going to take the lead on this. As soon as I saw your application the other day, and it was completely blank on that part where it says list everything, I went, oh, I know why he's coming to the commission today. So how could you you look like an educated person, and it doesn't take a lot of wits to know what that question means. List everything.
Sure.
I'm paraphrasing it. How could you possibly have forgotten to put on there your assault that you were fortunate enough to have retired or dismissed? And how could you not have remembered your diversion?
It was an ignorant mistake on my part.
Well, ignorant means you didn't understand the question. if you had said it was an oversight, I might buy that a little bit better.
Maybe I should have rephrased my answer. I was reading through the application probably a little too fast and glanced at the back of the application and did not fully read the part where it said include, charges.
Whether convicted or not, including expungements.
Yes, sir.
And then the next line says that if you don't make a full disclosure, it will. It doesn't say might, could. It says will result in denial of your application for a permit.
Yes, sir.
What do you want us to do?
Give me a chance to have a steady job, to provide for my family.
What kind of family you have?
I have 3 children. One with cerebral palsy, and three wonderful children: 16-year-old daughter, a 7-year-old son, and a 4-year-old son.
Well, I applaud your desire to support your family. And these, what was the possession of? What was kind of drug?
Marijuana.
How much?
I was at a Starwood when Starwood was here, sitting on the back fence, smoking a joint with a buddy, and somebody came up to him and asked if he had an extra one, and he obliged, and it was a undercover.
Do I read this right? It was about 22 years ago?
Yes, sir.
How old were you?
18.
Okay. And then the other matter was in 2007?
Yes, sir.
16 years ago?
Yes, sir.
If I'm reading that right? And that was dismissed?
Yes, sir.
Who brought the allegation of assault against you?
It was a gentleman that was it was in Murfreesboro. I had pulled up to pump some gas, and there's somebody in front of, I pulled up behind somebody that was already pumping gas, and I guess this fellow was sitting in front of the person that I had pulled up behind. They pulled away, and I pulled up to get fuel, and the gentleman that was already sitting there, he started mouthing off and yelling and everything. I tried to de-escalate the situation, telling him, I'm going to be very brief. I'll be in and out very, very quickly. And he went in, got into his truck, and everything was going fine. And as I was proceeding to leave the gas station, I threw my hand up like that at him, and I don't know if he thought I did a obscene gesture at him, but he ran. He then proceeded to get out of his vehicle and run to the passenger side of my vehicle and pound on my passenger side window. And at the time, I had a Tennessee handgun carry permit, and my firearm was in the seat, passenger seat of my vehicle. And I was telling him to stop, through the glass window. I was yelling at him to stop. And he looked down and saw my firearm sitting in the seat. And he backed away, and I backed up and left. And fast forward 2 years from that point, I had was going home through Smyrna and got pulled over for speeding. And the officer proceeded to ask me to step out and said that I was under arrest for aggravated assault. I said I, had no idea that anything had happened. And apparently this gentleman immediately called the Murfreesboro Police Department and said that I had threatened to kill him, and just was not truthful in his statement to the police. I can assure you that I'm a changed man from 21 years ago and even 14 years ago.
Well, you got kids.
Yes,
That'll change.
very quick.
And it sounds like one of your children is a challenging child, too.
Yes.
You've completed the company mandatory training for driving with Metro livery.
As far as I know, I have been on a ride-along, a couple of ride-alongs, and I've done the pre-employment drug screen. And as far as I know, I've watched videos and
Okay. Whatever my 2 cents is worth, you can actually go get both of these expunged from your record.
I would, that's on my agenda to do.
Thank you, sir, for answering my questions.
Yes, sir.
I make a motion to approve Mr. Bishop's application unless there's any other questions of him.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Bishop. Last item on the agenda is a discussion of the new public comment process for our meetings. Mr. Fields?
You'll recall at the May meeting, Ms. Costona shared that a new state law had passed and signed by the governor in TCA Title 8, Chapter 44, Part 1, Tennessee, as a part of the Tennessee Open Records Act. And it provides certain things that all public committees should do. And I'm going to defer back to Ms. Costonas to describe what needs to happen. And we do have some staff recommendations.
So yes, so as Billy was saying, the state legislature changed a couple of features of the State Open Meetings Act that applies to this commission as well as all other metro boards and commissions. Essentially, it boils down to two changes, one being that an agenda has to be circulated no less than 48 hours prior to the meeting. And I think that shouldn't really be a deviation from current practices, as I think your staff has generally circulated your agendas significantly before that point. To the extent there is any flexibility about us hearing matters that were not listed on the agenda, at this point, that would be diminished. We would need to actually be sure that everything that is addressed by the commission is in fact itemized on the agenda. The other thing is, and more significant deviation from your current past practice is the requirement to hold a public hearing, a public comment period, during every meeting. And so this is something every board and commission is having to start doing if they weren't doing it already. I represent an array of boards and commissions. Two of them already do this. And don't be too scared, because a lot of times they find that no one wants to speak, or one guy wants to speak and that's it. So it's not necessarily as onerous as it sounds like it might be. But legal will be making some recommendations in terms of what parameters you can place on this public comment period, and you can do that. And like one of them you kind of already have in place that you've been doing for a long time, which is limiting individual speakers to a time limit of 2 or 3 minutes in order to say their piece. But in addition to that, you can either limit the number of speakers overall or limit the overall period that the public comment period can last. I believe legal also recommends that the public comment period occur at the beginning of the meeting as the least disruptive option. And that they use a physical sign-up sheet to be made available at the meeting so that, and I think Lisa already does something very much like this in terms of having people fill out forms to speak, but they would list their names as people who want to speak at the beginning of the meeting and then be called up during the public comment period to take that opportunity.
Ms. Gascones, are we able to limit the topics that may be addressed, or is it wide open? I didn't see that in subsection B where they said reasonable restrictions and then gave some examples.
Yeah, I think the reasonable restrictions are really more procedural as that language contemplates it. I think we could limit it to the comments being germane to the items on the agenda for the meeting. It is a little tricky because some items on our agenda have public hearings already. So we've had this come up with one of our other commissions that does both a public comment period and then has subsequent public hearings. And I think one of their reasonable restrictions is that they've suggested that if you're going to comment, you're limited to one of those two opportunities. So that might be a reasonable restriction. But like other reasonable the restrictions, I mean, people will get off topic. I mean, you've seen that happen at public hearings that you've had previously, and our chair's pretty good about reining them in, but, sometimes it's hard to do. And, it just, if it's to the point where they're just wasting everybody's time talking about something that the commission has absolutely no ability to do anything about, then I think absolutely you can cut them off for that reason as well.
It seems that this new law would allow for us to have one public hearing, like if there's an item on our agenda that requires a public hearing, for instance, and I'm thinking of the new applications and the existing applications for the ETVs that we had earlier this year. That meeting or that item took place over 2 meetings. We had the public hearing portion the first meeting, and then we picked up for the second meeting. We didn't have further public comment. It's my recollection. So this would not require like additional public comment at the second meeting since we'd already had the public comment on that item of the agenda that carried over to the next meeting.
I hear what you're saying, but I think they're saying that there would have to be a public comment period at every meeting. And it wouldn't be like necessarily a continuation of the public hearing on the specific topic that was previously addressed. But the public comment period would be a separate obligation that the state legislature apparently just thought our citizens needed.
Well, for instance, when Mr. Mitchell came up to speak about, he wanted to bring up a topic about out-of-county people invading in the emergency zones. That might have been something for him to do at the beginning of the meeting during our open public comment.
Yes, he could have raised that issue in that context.
And we could have people during that open comment commenting about something that we ruled upon 2 meetings ago or whatever. Or
yeah, I mean, like I said, it's kind of subjective, but I think, if they're asking you about something that you have the capability to do something about, that to me seems kind of reasonable.
Well, doesn't the statute, though, say it has to be limited to items germane, or it has to be limited to matters germane to items on the agenda?
Certainly, and all items on the agenda are going to be things that you have the ability to take action on, pretty much, unless they're information only.
Well, I want to make sure I understand. So, like Mr. Mitchell, perfect example, he wanted to present on an item that was not on the agenda, and I directed him gently to raise the issue with Mr. Fields so he and his staff could see if they could address it, and if not, then it could be put on.
So there's no obligation for you all to take any immediate action in reaction to anything that people mention during the public comment period. So they can say, whatever they want within reason that's germane, as you say. But then, like, in terms of adding an item to the agenda to actually take some action on what they're what issue they've raised, they would have to follow the same procedure of like discussing it with staff, having staff discuss with the chair and see if that's something appropriate to add to the agenda for an upcoming meeting. You know, I mean, it doesn't get them around all of that. It just is an opportunity to engage your listening ears, I guess.
But they could be cut off if the topic is not germane to the items on the agenda, as subsection A speaks to.
Yes. I would be a little bit, like I said, I would be a little bit err on the side of being a little generous and letting them talk, because it's only going to be for 2 or 3 minutes anyway. But yes, if it's completely off topic.
And that's what I was going to say, because I mean, I think some experiences we've had here, and I remember a time when a woman who's a power wheelchair user came because she saw Wrecker on the agenda. And I think it was this hearing last year. You know, it was about assignments or it was about licenses, but she saw in the public notice that this was about wreckers, and she had something she wanted to say about wrecker service. I think, you know, and she said it in the public hearing when it wasn't really appropriate for the hearing, but it would have been appropriate for a public comment period. I mean, records are germane to what we're doing, not specifically assignment, but, and I think the comment that was made today would be an appropriate comment at a public hearing when the issue of records, however specific, is on the agenda.
That's not, make sure I understand, like today's agenda, if I wanted to come speak, say, about horse-drawn carriages, which is not on the agenda, would that be appropriate?
No, I don't think it would.
And after Mr. Mitchell made his comment, he could still be politely directed to Mr. Fields to decide whether it should be an agenda item later. And Mr. Fields is smiling over there, may the record reflect.
I always appreciate when the commission defers to me.
So actually, it's a fairly narrow path here about what you can speak about, because it doesn't even include everything that we're responsible for. It's just what we're dealing with that day, correct?
Correct. I mean, so like if you, but you know, usually you do have multiple types of passenger vehicles for hire or wreckers, like the categories of types of vehicles that you regulate. Your agenda is generally going to include, you know, 4 or 5 of them. And so, you know, if somebody's speaking, but if the agenda doesn't have anything about scooters or horse-drawn carriages about it, then it seems to me that that would be off topic.
I was planning, there's several commissions I was planning to go talk to, you know?
Yeah. Well,
Commissioner Rogers may be prohibited from bringing up bicycles, right?
yeah. Well, and I just have to say, I appreciate Ms. Costonis's, you know, talking about being relatively generous, because, I mean, I think that if somebody has a real problem with horse-drawn carriages and they want to share that information with somebody and come down in public to do it, as opposed to calling Billy, or maybe they don't know to call Billy, but they know about this group. I mean, I think it's, as sort of a public commission, it would be kind of appropriate to at least let them have their 2 minutes, right? You know.
Well, you would be adopting a practice where you would have a certain number of people for a certain amount of time. I've spoken to Ms. Costonis a couple of times about it, and I think staff's recommendation would be to allow as many as 8 people to speak for a period of 2 minutes each at the beginning of the meeting. And again, I think it's based on Ms. Costonis. You don't necessarily have to let them talk about anything, but if they stray a little bit, you know, you'd have the right to say, no, you're off topic, or they'll probably get it in before you have an opportunity to say they're off topic, and they will already have the topic out there. Then if the commission said, you know, we want to hear about that later, then what we would do is establish an agenda item for you to be able to hear about that. And if it required a public hearing, certainly the person come back, or they could provide information we could provide to the commission. So I think today what we need is for you to adopt a process that we would follow beginning at the July meeting.
And I will say that there are a couple of exceptions. There are a couple of types of meetings that you all could theoretically have where the public comment period would not be required. Like Erica was noting that there are a couple of exceptions. Like if you were to do a meeting that was solely dedicated to kind of one disciplinary hearing, you would not have to have a comment period at the beginning of that meeting. Or if you were to do a meeting that was informational items only, upon which there would be no votes, no actionable items taken up, then again, it would not necessarily be required to allow a public comment period before that meeting as well.
So staff is recommending about a 16-minute public comment before meetings with actionable items on the agenda.
That would be staff recommendation. That was based on my observations at the Metro Council a few weeks ago where they allowed 16 people to speak for 2 minutes. And I thought, well, if the council does 16 people, if the commission were to do 8, clearly the council's authority ranges countywide. Of course, yours does too, but a lot of different topics. You know, it could be 8, it could be 10. It just has to be something that's reasonable and not in an attempt to limit the public access to your ears and the public's ears.
And to make sure our meetings don't get hijacked.
Correct.
So do we need a motion for a procedural change or an addition to our procedures?
It sounds
I think
like
it's
we
a
need
process. Wouldn't have to be a public, it's not a rule, it's just, it's a process they would just adopt.
Okay.
'Cause
In order to adopt a rule change, you
You'd
have to have a public hearing.
There's no rule regarding, but what this would do is as you know, the rules allow the director to place things on your agenda. In this particular case, the state law has directed that it be on the agenda, so I would be placing this based on your guidance on how long you'd want people to speak, and the process you'd want to use. So I did not see it as a rule making.
Yeah, I think we could adopt it as a policy that we would allow up to 8 people to speak in a public comment period at 2 minutes apiece.
We'll see how it goes. It's just a recommendation from
I think if you
the chairperson.
if you can make a motion that, I think legal would appreciate the motion for the record.
All right. Well, I make a motion that we adopt a public comment of 16 minutes with the anticipating having 8 people for 2 minutes each at the beginning of each actionable agenda meeting.
Second.
If I could just add some discussion, so, and make a recommendation maybe for clarification. So you want to propose a dedicated time of 16 minutes, but up to 8 people at 2 minutes apiece. I think maybe it would be better to consider up to 8 people at 2 minutes apiece. Don't say anything about 16 minutes in case we want to hear a little bit more. I don't want to have an arbitrary, like, we've gone 16 minutes, we're stopping.
Unless some of us want to stop at 16 minutes and get on to the actionable items. All right, let me amend the motion, subject to another second. I would amend the motion that Mr. Fields, that we adopt a policy where Mr. Fields and staff would put onto the agenda an open meeting at the beginning of our actionable agenda meetings for up to 8 people at 2 minutes each.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Any other items on the agenda, Mr.?
I have no other items for you this month, sir.
All right. Well, I believe that concludes everything on the agenda. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Well, since the gallery's empty, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.